Hi, everybody. So my name is Maria Carter Giannini. I am a U.S. history teacher. I teach at the high school level, but like many of you, I found myself in a new adventure of homeschooling. And so I thought I would start doing some lessons on, I'm going to do a few on California history. So obviously my background is not in fourth grade, but I'm getting some guidance from some people on that. So the plan is to do this every Monday. And so I will upload recordings of these as well. I have two girls, so I have one girl that's in fourth grade and one that's in second grade. So that's why I'm home with them and doing these online lessons. So hopefully they're helpful. Please feel free to give me feedback, things that could be better or improved, or things that you'd like to see. Definitely open to all of those things. So let me go ahead and share my screen as we go here. Okay, so here we go. So we're going to start with a lesson on the gold rush. My plan is to do one on the Transcontinental Railroad next week. So tune in for that if you're interested in that. So materials that you're going to need for this lesson would be line paper for writing, blank paper for drawing, and then some art supplies. Crayons and markers are great. A pair of scissors, and then I found this great Gold Rush game on homeschoolgiveaways.com from 2016. So feel free to go to that site and take a look at that. I was really surprised to find so many great resources, which was wonderful. But so my girls have really had a good time playing that. So the warm-up question for your students would be to just pretend that we're going on a treasure hunt, and what are the kinds of things that you would bring with you? And so then I tell them that we're going to go on a treasure hunt to learn about California history and the gold rush, a really important time in California history. And then before we get into deeply, I'm going to have your students choose what role they want to be today. So we're going to do something with this later on in the lesson. So do you want to be a gold miner? So someone who's traveling to California with the dream of striking it rich, finding big nuggets of gold? Or do you want to be a shop owner where you might be selling supplies to some of these gold miners? So selling things like shovels, pickaxes, clothes, food, that sort of thing. Or would you be more interested in being a ship's captain? So someone that is taking people to and from California. Now I want to start with, do you know anything about gold already? Do you have things in your house that you think might be made out of gold? Do you think it's real gold? What are things we know about gold? I think, a good starting place is to talk about how valuable it is. And that's because there's not a whole lot of it in the world. And so we can talk about resources like that. So one thing I was really surprised to learn, I did not know this myself. I thought, well, the students are going to want to know where gold comes from. How does it get in the ground and in the water when we start finding these gold deposits? And so I was really interested to find out that initially it comes from outer space. So I thought that was really cool. So it's created inside massive stars as a lot of these elements come together. And then sometimes these stars explode into a supernova, and then it travels to Earth when the Earth is very young, in the form of meteorites. So that's how it gets to Earth. So, and because this substance is so heavy, it sinks pretty deeply into the Earth. So that's why it wasn't just kind of laying on top. So we find gold in what we call deposits. So some of them are found in streams and riverways, or in big rock formations. And that gold has been found on all continents except Antarctica. Poor Antarctica. And so we're going to jump ahead quite a bit here to the year 1848, when gold is discovered. So gold is discovered at a place called Sutter's Mill in California, in Coloma, so which is quite near Sacramento, if you're familiar with that area. So it's found by a man named James Marshall. So he's working for Sutter. Sutter is trying to build a community. So James Marshall is building a sawmill for Mr. Sutter, and then he finds something shiny in the water. So he goes down and he picks it up. And he shows Mr. Sutter, and they do some tests on it, and they figure out that it is indeed gold. And so you might think that Mr. Sutter would be beyond pleased, be very happy about this, but he was actually very upset about it because he was trying to build this community. And now he knows a lot of people are going to be coming into the area and that it's going to get too crowded. And he's absolutely correct. So there's a newspaper man that finds out about this. He publicizes it. The president is even going in front of Congress. So President Polk is going in front of Congress and saying, oh, this is so exciting. And so Mr. Sutter was exactly right. So as they hear about this discovery, people just come in droves. So they come in very large numbers and they start squatting on his land. So squatting just means someone comes onto your property and they just squat and they sit there. And so that's what happens. So they're stealing his crops, they're stealing his cattle, that sort of thing. So poor Mr. Marshall and Mr. Sutter will not get a penny out of this big discovery that happens on his land. But this discovery is going to bring a lot of people to California. So 300,000 people are going to come to California in the gold rush. So here we can just see these are where the gold fields are. So these are our biggest deposits. You can see here's Coloma. So this is where the first discovery was. So this is the American River that feeds into Sacramento. And if you're familiar with Lake Tahoe, that's right over here. And then if you get closer to the Oregon border, there are gold fields at Shasta and Wairika as well. So who was living in California before gold was discovered? I think it's important to always check in with that context. California is not created out of the gold rush. So this was Spanish territory for a very long time until they are kicked out in 1821, and then it is Mexican territory. So you have a high Mexican population. You do have cattle ranchers that are coming in from other parts of the country, so they're using it for grazeland, traders and hunters as well. Native Americans, of course. We'll take a look at a map of all of the different Native American groups that were in the area as well. If you know anything about what happens right before the gold rush, that is the Mexican-American War. So this is from 1846 to 1848. And so this is the Americans are victorious here. So Mexico loses this war. And this is when California becomes property of the United States. So how would you get to California in 1848? So start kind of figuring out what kinds of modes of transportation do we have in 1848. And so hopefully you'll get answers like riding a horse or walking or taking a ship. And so those are our options. So there's going to be different routes that you can take to get to California, but none of them are terribly easy. So there's going to be advantages and disadvantages to each. So you can see if you're leaving from Boston, you could go all the way around the Cape Horn of South America and then land in San Francisco. But as you can guess, that's going to take quite a while. Now, if you live in the interior of the United States, you can just go by land, but that's also going to take a while as well. And then our third option is the Panama route. So we'll talk about each one of these. So if you traveled by sea, you might travel on a ship like this. So this is called a clipper ship. So you'd be traveling around that Cape Horn of South America. So advantages here, this is the safest route. You're going to have fewer diseases that you would be susceptible to on board, but there's a lot of disadvantages here too. It's very expensive. It would cost hundreds of dollars for you to get a ticket on one of these ships. There's overcrowding on boats, so you're going to have people that are seasick, things like that. You're very vulnerable to weather. So if you are in a squall or some sort of big storm, you could be knocked off course or even sink. So there's definitely some risk there as well. Also, you're going to have limited food. So you're going to have whatever food is on board. It's probably not that great. Some of it might even be rotting and that sort of thing. But there are more than 15,000 people that choose this route to come to California. Now, next option, if you traveled by land, where this is the vast majority of people, this is how they're getting to California. So you would come in a covered wagon like this. So 40,000 people travel this way. And it takes about 4 to 6 months. It's a 3,000-mile trip, obviously depending on where you're coming from, but most people are coming from the East Coast or some are coming from the Midwest. Advantages here, this is cheaper than other methods. You're not going to be spending hundreds of dollars on, a ticket for a boat. You can bring your whole family, which could be an advantage. And you're going to have better food options because you can stop on the way, you can fish, you can hunt, you can trade with Native Americans as well. But dangers here, you're also going to be very susceptible to weather. If you think about areas you're going to be traveling through, you could be traveling through areas that are hit by tornadoes or hurricanes, things like that, drought as well. You could end up with accidents. So you could have a broken wagon wheel. Your oxen could die, things like that. You might have a child that ends up with broken bones that you have to try to figure out how to set while you're on the road. Disease as well, and attacks by Native Americans were quite common. If you know anything about Native American history, you know that there's going to be a lot of conflict between the white settlers and the Native Americans. So some of them do start responding with violence in this time period. Last but not least, there is the Panama route, which is shorter, but it's probably the most dangerous out of the three. So you can sail to Panama. So that's step one. So say you're coming from Boston, you're going to go along this route. You're going to stop in Panama City. And then you're going to unload, and then you get to get on a canoe because there's a series of rivers that you now need to go up and down, and then you get off of your canoe, and then you get your very luxurious mule. And so then you're going to be traveling on a mule for 45 miles to get to the Pacific side of Panama. So you can see you're trying to get from the Atlantic side to the Pacific. Then you wait for the next ship to California, which might be few and far between. Advantages here, though, this is much quicker. You're looking at 1 to 3 months rather than 4 to 6 months. And there's multiple stops. So if you want to get off and rest, if you're struggling with some sickness, you can take a break. So that's a nice advantage too. Disadvantages, though, like I mentioned, this is the most dangerous. You're going to be much more susceptible to diseases like malaria, especially if you're hiking through these jungles in Panama. So that's a risk you take. And you might have to wait a while to get that ship to California. So then this is a time for students to decide which route do you think you would take. So what is valuable to you? Do you want to get to California fast? Do you want to make sure you get there safely? Are you thinking you want to bring your family, or is your family going to stay behind and you're going to go and try to strike it rich? So you decide which strategy is the most important to you. So who is coming to California? So we know there's a lot of people coming. There's 300,000 coming. A third of all of those people are coming from abroad. So they're coming from other countries. The most common is from China. So the Chinese are the largest group of foreigners that come to California. There's a lot of issues in China. In the 1840s, there's a lot of war and poverty, unemployment. So a lot of people don't have jobs. So that is what we call a push factor in terms of immigration. The other 2/3 are coming from within the United States. So here's a quick video that we'll watch that will recap some of the stuff that we already talked about, and then talk a little bit more about some of the ways that people found gold.
The California Gold Rush. Gold was first discovered in California by James W. Marshall at Sutter's Mill near the city of Coloma, California. The story goes back to 1848. James was building a sawmill for John Sutter when he saw something shining in the river. They both tested the metal. It was gold. Soon, the word got out. It was no longer a secret. Not many Americans lived in California, but that soon changed. By 1849, thousands upon thousands of people arrived in search of gold. The journey to California was dangerous. Some would go by sea from the East Coast, or on land along the California Trail. These people would become known as the 49ers. One way to find gold was to pan for it. Miners would sink the pan into the water and shake the dirt away to reveal any gold. Miners needed a lot of equipment, including a mining pan, a shovel, a pick, and food supplies. Businesses who sold this equipment to the miners often became richer than the miners could ever be themselves. Wherever gold or silver was discovered, miners would move in and set up camp. These would often grow into boom towns, which would become deserted once all the gold opportunities had dried up. So, was the gold rush worth it? Some became wealthy, but most returned home empty-handed. Subscribe to see more fun history videos.
Okay, so now this is a good time to ask students to practice a causation statement. So check in with them and see what they can come up with. So what caused the gold rush? So if you want to pause there, you can, to check in with them. And then we'll do these at the end as well. So these are pictures that I share with my high school students as well about the gold rush. So these are great documents to take a look at. So here we've got our miner. So he's got his gold pan and he's trying to put the water in and out of this, trying to find gold. Notice he's wearing a hat to protect himself from the sun and other elements. And notice in the background here too that we have another gold miner. So we see that they're pretty close together, that there could be some competition there. This is a picture of the kinds of supplies that they would be bringing with them. So you can see he's all decked out. He's got some good quality boots there, it looks like. He's got his gold pan here. He's got some cooking pans stacked on his head. He's got a shovel. He's got a scale if he ends up finding some gold, a teapot, and some food. Because the idea is you want to stake your claim and then not leave because you don't want anyone to take your area. So he's ready to go. Important to note that if you're a fan of wearing jeans, you have the gold rush to thank for that. So they are invented during the gold rush by this man, Levi Strauss. That's why they're called Levi's. Because basically the miners would be squatting down a lot, and a lot of times when they would do that, their pants would split right down the back and right down the middle. So they'd get big holes in their pants. And so he comes up with this substance of denim, so this nice thick material. So if you're a fan of jeans, you have the gold rush to thank for that as well. So a good time to check in with students too if they can figure out any problems that there might be with the panning method. And so that brings us to some other methods that can be used to achieve this goal of trying to get more gold. So the idea is that the more earth that you can process, the better. So we end up with, this is called a rocker or a sluice box. So you're going to be pouring lots of water, lots of earth here in this pan. There's a handle here, and then it would rock back and forth. So you can try to separate out the gold from the pebbles. And then we go on to the most extreme method, and that is hydraulic mining. So it's very devastating to the environment. They're using high pressure hoses basically to wash away entire hillsides to expose the gold underneath. I'm going to show you a quick video here about this. It's going to get into some of the environmental impacts. So this will be really important when we do our effect statements at the end.
By the 1880s, an entire region of the United States built upon the cornerstone of mining was coming to terms with its consequences.
Hydraulic mining means that you create a dam and reservoir at a relatively high level in the Sierra, which it's ideally suited for, and then bring the water down in iron pipes under high pressure to where gold-bearing ancient rivers were buried, and then release that water under high pressure with enormous water cannons called monitors or little giants. And you could just demolish the landscape at that time going for the gold in these buried rivers.
Oh, the hydraulic mining was just so spectacularly ingenious and so astoundingly destructive.
More than a century later, the scars of hydraulic mining remained etched in the landscape of the Sierra Nevada. But in 1884, as a federal court injunction effectively stopped the practice, hydraulic mining was also wreaking unprecedented havoc on San Francisco Bay.
What happened was that a great sine curve, estimated at 1.5 billion cubic yards of material, essentially was washed out of the Sierra, down into the rivers, into the Delta, and then down into San Francisco Bay. And it's still coming down to this day. I think of it as the gift that keeps on taking, because in fact, what the mining companies were doing was shifting their overhead onto the public, which has had to pay to try to stabilize these rivers ever since then with enormous levees and dredging.
Hydraulic mining deposited as much as 3 feet of new sediment in the northern portions of San Francisco Bay. It also left the bay with one other pernicious legacy: the widespread presence of mercury. Mercury was essential to the process of separating gold from ore, and as chance would have it, the source was close at hand. In the hills above San Francisco Bay, near San Jose, the new Almaden mine would become the largest mercury mine in North America.
We have mines in the coast ranges that are the cinnabar mines, mercury sulfide mines where the mercury was mined, and there's mining that was done in the Sierra Nevada region where that purified elemental mercury was used to extract gold and silver. The Bay is still currently getting inputs from both of these types of mining regions.
Today, the new Almaden mine's legacy endures in the name of the region's newspaper and the mercury-laden sediments of the Guadalupe River that flow into San Francisco Bay.
So the new Almaden mine actually sits right near the Guadalupe River. And right now, the Guadalupe River is in a state of emergency. I mean, basically, mercury pollutes the entire bottom of that river. And they have a separate cleanup plan just for that river because it is so contaminated.
By the end of the 19th century, as much as 8 million pounds of mercury from new Almaden and the hydraulic operations in the Sierra Nevada were unleashed into the rivers of the San Francisco Bay watershed.
It's actually amazing how well distributed mercury is. You can measure mercury pretty much everywhere we look.
Mercury remains relatively harmless until the process of methylation occurs. Methylmercury, a neurotoxin, works its way into the food chain, accumulating in ever larger, ever more harmful quantities in ever larger organisms.
And then it just moves up the food chain. And so anybody who's eating fish out of our bay is getting a dose of mercury every time they eat a large fish, like white croaker, halibut, or striped bass. Any of those bigger fish that they eat and they catch in the bay is going to have a large dose of mercury in it.
Okay, so a lot to unpack there. Big takeaways there. Again, the hydraulic mining that is just stripping away the hillsides. It does get to more gold deposits for these larger mining companies, but definitely some environmental impact. So when you see time periods of when we do have big rains in California, the likelihood of mudslides is very much increased because we wiped away so much of that soil, any of the natural grasses that were there that were holding the land together. And then the mercury poisoning that's happened as a result as well, because they were using mercury to separate the gold from the rest of the rock material. So definitely some issues for today. These are great things to include when we do our effect statements. So again, imagery here of these big hoses just wiping away the land and the hillsides there. And then here you can see the pollution of the streams here in California as a result of the gold rush. So this I really like showing with students too. So we have Mr. Schufelt, so he has struck it rich. He's doing better than most. So week 1, he gains $82.72. Week 2, he's got $42. Week 3, he's gotten $61.44. And the 4th week is his best week of all. He gets $112.81. So you could definitely do a math project with students on this. So, maybe take this money, this $112.81. Given the cost of these items, what are the kinds of things he could buy? What are the things he's going to have to do without? And it also gets us to this idea that the real people making money are the shop owners and the merchants, not the miners. So what would the experience of a miner be like? So this experience of staking a claim is probably quite stressful, trying to find the right spot. Is there even gold in that spot? They're probably quite lonely. We saw that picture of the man panning for gold. He's all by himself. They might be hungry. They might be getting sick. They're cold. They're tired. They have this failure for most of them. The vast majority of them are not finding gold. So how does that feel? Physical danger. We have a lot of crime that's happening in these boom towns as well. And if you did find gold, it was probably just flakes. It wasn't big nuggets like they were finding at Sutter's Mill early on. So most gold miners are going to give up after a couple of months. Some of them will stay in the gold regions and work for a larger mining company. So these companies that are doing the hydraulic mining. And sometimes miners would try to escape all of these kind of terrible things by writing letters home to their families. So that takes us to a nice writing activity that you can do with your students. So with that page of lined paper, so pick that role that they picked at the beginning. So were they the miner? Were they the shopkeeper? Were they the ship's captain? And they're going to write a letter home to their family based on that job. So obviously you've got a lot of information about what it's like to be a miner, some amount of information about what it's like to be a merchant or a shop owner. So think about what details they can include in their letter, the kinds of experiences they've had. Are they feeling optimistic? If they're a ship's captain, are they meeting people on their way to California where they're so full of hope? Or are they meeting people on their way back with kind of their hat in their hand and they're feeling kind of depressed about this whole thing, and what are they going to do next? So letter writing is a really nice way to work on perspective and point of view. So this is a great exercise. So if you end up doing this, I would love to see copies of the letters that your kids end up writing. So feel free to send those my way. Boom towns are something else to consider here too. This is one of the reasons why we have so many very populous cities in California, is because of the impact of the gold rush. So to give you an example, here in 1845, before the gold rush, San Francisco has 400 people living in it. So you can see a picture of it there on the left. And then by 1850, when the gold rush is mostly over, you've got 32,000. So that's what this image is here. So you can see all the boats that are coming into San Francisco Bay. So we have a lot of cities like that just have this population explosion. Some towns are also going to become ghost towns. So these larger deposits might be found somewhere else. And so people are going to move on to another region. So it leaves some of these towns relatively deserted. You can look at Coloma as a quasi example of this. So remember, this is where Sutter's Mill is. This is where gold was first discovered. And then it kind of taps out. And then people start finding more gold in Placerville. So they're going to move on to Placerville. So even today, even though Coloma is relatively close to a big city like Sacramento, there's only 200 people that live there. So there's actually more people buried in the cemetery at Coloma than there are actually living in the city. A more extreme example would be the city of Bodie, California. So this is a prime ghost town. So let's take a look at the numbers. So in 1879, there's 10,000 people there. There's 2,000 buildings. But by 1920, there's only 120 people left in Bodie. And then in 1943, as World War II is kicking up here, there are just 3 people left in Bodie. So in the 1960s, it gets bought out by the California National Park System. And so today it is a tourist attraction. So you can go and visit Bodie. So a few pictures here. So this is early on. So this is about the 1860s or so. So you can see that there's quite a few buildings here in Bodie. And these are current day pictures. So this is what you might see if you went to go visit this ghost town in Bodie. You can see some crumbling structures here. Okay, let's move on to Native American tribes. So this is a great image to use with the students, just showing that there were so many different types of Native American tribes living in California. So the region that we're talking about is really here. So the Nisenan tribe, but there's going to be other groups like the Washoe here, the Sierra Miwok, the Concow, the Patwin as well. So you can have a lot of different tribes in the mix here. So how do we think life changes for them as a result of the gold rush? Well, pretty dramatically. So again, it's the Nisenan tribe that's the most populous here. Gold miners are coming in, they're taking over their land, they're outright attacking the tribes, they're sapping all of the resources that the tribes depend on. And so some tribes are going to start attacking them back as a way to try to maintain some control. This is an example of an ad or advertisement to try to get people to move to California. So this is specifically advertising the new ships that are being used here. So that's going to move you into your art project for today. And so your art project is to try to make an advertisement to try to convince people to come to your gold rush town. Because after all, the more people that are in your town, the more successful you're probably going to be. This is great if you want to take that shop owner hat and wear that. So this is a good example of how to entice people to come. So how are you going to sell it? So feel free to come up with some sort of slogan or motto. So you can see there's one here: never work another day in your life. Come to California to find gold. So have some fun with that. So that's what your blank paper is for, and your art supplies. So have some fun with that. So then getting into what I find are, I'm finding them a lot for our 4th grade skills, is cause and effect statements. So we kind of played around with the cause part already. So this is a nice way to kind of bring this all together. So what caused the gold rush? So you might want to have students be focusing on, the events at Sutter's Mill as being the direct cause. So feel free to play around with those, and then have them add another sentence. This is important because, so really talking about the significance of this event. And then what are the effects of the gold rush? Do you want to focus on the population explosions, or the impact on Native Americans, or the impact on the environment? So this is good sentence practice. Right, and then if you can check in with your student, hopefully they've learned a lot about the gold rush from this presentation. I hope that's the case, so feel free to run through that with them. All right, and then it's time to do the really fun part, and that is the game. So this is the game, again, that I found on a homeschooling website that I really liked. So you just print it out. So you print out the game board. So you're traveling to California from Missouri or from Iowa, which is a really common place for people to be starting. And then you have a little covered wagon that you might have. So it comes with 2. You could always print out more. And then you'll travel along your route. And so there's a whole bunch of game pieces. So things like this: stormy weather, lose 2 turns, or hire a guide, move ahead 2 spaces. And so you can see how your kids do with that adventure. I hope they make it on their adventure there. So again, thanks for checking this out. My hope is to do a lesson every Monday, so I will keep adding these as long as I can get guides on content that's helpful for our 4th graders. Please feel free to give me some feedback, things that you'd like to see, and I will try to make that happen. So again, thanks again. My name is Maria Carter Giannini. I'm a high school history teacher, but putting on a homeschooling for 4th grader hat for the time being. So thanks. I hope you're enjoying and just making it through, navigating this new adventure of the coronavirus quarantine. So good luck, everybody.